What if one of the biggest royal scandals was not what happened in public, but what happened behind closed palace doors? Because the latest claim shaking the monarchy is not just about Andrew. It is about Queen Elizabeth's final years, the people around her, and a chilling question that refuses to go away. When the Queen was older, frailer, and under constant pressure, was her most controversial son still able to get what he wanted? And if that is true, then this story is no longer just about scandal. It is about influence, protection, and whether the monarchy spent years shielding the very crisis that would later damage it the most. Stay with me, because the deeper you go into this story, the less it looks like a family problem, and the more it looks like a system that kept saying not now until it was too late. We bring celebrity content on a daily basis, so don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The headline making waves claims Queen Elizabeth was blackmailed into helping Andrew in her final days. But here is where the story gets more precise, and frankly, more serious. What is actually being attributed in current reporting is a set of allegations by royal biographer Andrew Lownie, who said during a recent literary festival appearance that Andrew allegedly pressured, bullied, and influenced the Queen near the end of her life. Lownie also claimed that by then, Charles was already carrying much of the real institutional burden. Those remarks are being widely repeated, but they remain allegations from a biographer, not legal findings or a palace-confirmed account. So why are people taking the claim seriously at all? Because it lands on top of a long, ugly history. Andrew's public collapse did not start yesterday. In 2019, after his disastrous BBC interview about Jeffrey Epstein, he stepped back from public duties. In January 2022, Buckingham Palace announced that his military affiliations and royal patronages had been returned to the Queen. A month later, he settled Virginia Giuffre's civil lawsuit without admitting wrongdoing. That sequence did enormous reputational damage and made any later claim about royal protection far more explosive. Now think about that for a second. If a son has already become one of the monarchy's biggest liabilities, and if the institution has already been forced to distance itself from him publicly, then what would it mean if he still had private leverage inside the family? That is the heart of this story. According to Lownie, Andrew was not just a disgraced royal trying to survive scandal. He was still someone who could allegedly go directly to the Queen and push for outcomes that suited him. Lownie's broader argument is that the family, and especially the palace culture around it, enabled Andrew for years. Again, that is his interpretation, but it is the reason this story is getting traction. It reframes Andrew not as a royal outcast, but as someone who remained protected long after the public thought the fall had already happened. And this is where the story gets darker. Because once you start asking whether Andrew was protected, another question immediately follows. Protected from what? That is where Kazakhstan comes in. And this part matters, because it is one of the examples Lownie used to suggest that warnings about Andrew were ignored. At the literary festival talk, Lownie reportedly revived a claim that officials had raised, alarm over Andrew and a cash-related episode linked to Kazakhstan. That specific suitcase allegation is not independently established in the reporting, but the broader Kazakhstan controversy around Andrew is very real and has been scrutinized for years. One documented issue is the 2007 sale of Andrew's former home, Sunning Hill Park, to Kazakh businessman Timur Kulubayev for £15 million, which was about £3 million above the asking price. Later reporting said the financing drew scrutiny because of links investigators examined in a wider bribery context. At the same time, reports also noted there was no evidence Andrew or Kulubayev knew of any wrongdoing tied to those financing allegations, and Kulubayev denied involvement in bribery or corruption. So there is a difference here between a documented property controversy and the more dramatic cash in a suitcase claim now being repeated. That distinction is important, because royal scandals often get blurred together. A dramatic claim appears, it gets repeated, and suddenly the public is left trying to figure out which parts are sourced, which parts are inferred, and which parts are simply too explosive to ignore. And maybe that is the real tension here. Not just whether every allegation is proven, but whether the palace ever truly confronted the pattern. So let me ask you this. Was Queen Elizabeth standing by a troubled son out of maternal loyalty, or was the monarchy so invested in protecting itself that it kept protecting Andrew too. Because those are not the same thing, and the answer changes everything. For years, Andrew's story has been told as a personal downfall, a privileged royal, a catastrophic interview, a legal settlement, public disgrace. But this new wave of reporting pushes a much harsher theory, that Andrew's survival inside the royal machine was not accidental, that he lasted because the institution around him let him last. And when you look back, that is why Lownie's comments hit such a nerve. He is not just accusing Andrew of bad behavior. He is accusing the wider family structure of enabling it, minimizing it, and absorbing the political cost instead of stopping it. That accusation becomes even more unsettling when tied to the Queen's final years. Elizabeth was not just a mother. She was the monarch. So if she was, as Lownie alleges, increasingly vulnerable to pressure from Andrew while Charles was quietly handling more of the state-like burden, then this is not merely a family tragedy. It becomes a question about who had real influence at the top of the institution when appearances still suggested the crown was steady. And notice how this story is being talked about now, not years ago. That timing is not random. Interest in Andrew has surged again because recent reporting says he was arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office over allegations that he sent confidential government documents to Jeffrey Epstein. He was later released under investigation, and that reporting also says he denies wrongdoing. Those developments do not prove Lownie's claims about the Queen, but they do explain why old questions about palace protection are suddenly back in the spotlight. And that is the part many royal observers find impossible to ignore. Every time the Andrew story seems finished, it comes back with another layer. First the interview, then the lawsuit, then the loss of patronages, then the renewed investigations. And now, this deeply uncomfortable claim that in the final chapter of the Queen's life, Andrew may still have been able to bend the room around him. Whether you believe Lownie completely or not, the story forces the same brutal question onto the table. How? Many warning signs does a monarchy get before silence becomes complicity? Because institutions do not usually collapse from one scandal. They weaken when they keep treating each new scandal as survivable, manageable, containable. That is why this story matters beyond gossip. It is not just about whether Andrew was difficult, demanding, or manipulative. It is about whether the people around the late Queen failed to protect both the monarch and the monarchy from a problem they already understood. And if that happened, then the true scandal is not only Andrew's behavior. It is that the system may have known the risk, seen the damage, and still kept the door open. So, was Queen Elizabeth really blackmailed into helping Andrew in her final days? Based on the reporting, that word goes further than the sourced claim. What is actually on record right now is a biographer alleging pressure, bullying, and long-running protection inside the royal family. That is still serious. In fact, in some ways it is more disturbing because it suggests not one shocking act, but a pattern. And maybe that is why this story is landing so hard. Because if the most powerful family in Britain could not draw a firm line with one of its own, then what does that say about power, loyalty, and accountability behind palace walls?